If you're a real estate broker in Puget Sound area, if you're a member of the Northwest Multiple Listing Service, remember back in 2019 where we had that whole deal. Okay, now we can put zero for the commission being offered by the sellers to the buyers. Basically made the buyer's commission negotiable. Well, that was the Northwest Multiple Listing System getting out ahead of this lawsuit that we're going to talk about here. So if you're a real estate broker, you're going to want to hear this. Let's get into it. Here we go.
You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
All right. So the title we've got here is Northwest MLS members provide buyers and sellers with choices, control, and complete transparency. That's what this is all about. You've got this deal where people are perceiving real estate brokers, they're colluding to keep those real estate commissions up high. Well, I don't really think so, but a jury said, yeah, that's the deal. And our MLS, the Northwest Multiple Listing Service, has basically been super proactive on, 4 years ahead of this lawsuit, right? The nearly $1.8 billion jury verdict in a home seller's class action lawsuit in Missouri, against the National Association of Realtors, the NAR. Summit Properties Northwest Brokers, you are not a member of that. Yep, don't have to pay those big dues. So we got the NAR lawsuit and large brokerage franchisors. Those were Berkshire Hathaway's Home Services and also Keller Williams were named in those lawsuits. And the NAR has consumers and brokers in Washington state asking questions about residential real estate brokerages and basically commissions. The jury found that the defendants conspired to artificially inflate commissions paid to real estate brokers based on a mandatory NAR rule that requires the seller via the listing broker to offer compensation to the buyer's broker. So that's when a number of years ago, in our MLS, it was reduced to zero. You can put zero. Before, you had to put at least $1. You had to put some kind of compensation. Now it's basically negotiable. What's the bottom line here? Has anything really changed? No, not really. Not really. Commission structure is still about the same. Sellers are still offering about the same to listing brokers and buying brokers. Not much has changed. But has there been some more transparency throughout this process? Yeah, I'd say there has. But was anybody really concerned about it before? I don't know. Maybe in Missouri they were, right? Since 2019, Northwest MLS has spearheaded initiatives that afford buyers and sellers more information about broker compensation in their transaction and clear opportunities to negotiate their broker's compensation. Those initiatives also serve to promote innovation and competition among brokers. Does it do that? I don't really think so. I mean, it's a bunch of talk, but it looks better and you can't be sued, right? So, because we've already done exactly what the lawsuit's talking about, which is, hey, let's make this negotiable. Now there's a box on the MLS purchase and sale agreement that basically outlines kind of what the real estate broker's compensation is. So what did the MLS do? In 2019, the Northwest Multiple Listing Service eliminated the requirement imposed by other MLSs that a seller via the listing broker, so you got the listing broker representing the seller, offer compensation to the buyer's broker. Bring the buyer's broker in. Hey, what am I going to pay you? All right. Well, it's negotiable. At the same time, the Northwest Multiple Listing Service was the first listing service in the country to publish the amount of compensation offered to the buyer's broker. So it's just fully disclosed. There's none of this. Wow, are they colluding to keep real estate commissions really high? You don't have to pay any commission. I mean, you can list your home by yourself. You can do that, but you might miss out on a multiple offer situation, not so much with interest rates having gone to the moon. And by the moon, I mean maybe up to 8%. Maybe they exceeded 8% a little bit a couple of weeks ago. But with the Fed kind of holding off with raising rates, doing a little pause there, rates have come down a little bit. So you're probably mid sevens as I record this in mid-November 2023, which are not high rates, but relatively high compared to 2.75 or 3% during the pandemic, right? So these changes were the MLS's first steps towards providing buyers and sellers with increased understanding, choice, and control of how they compensate their real estate broker. All right, kind of. It just basically means that sellers have a talk with their brokers. All right, we want to offer this. We want to offer this. This is what's standard for the market. If you want to get top dollar for your home and you're trusting a real estate professional to do their job, you don't want to try and sell it yourself. If you think that you can sell the home yourself, especially in the kind of market we're in right now, go for it. But you could be leaving a ton of money on the table. And that's where the kind of checks and balances come in, is if you're willing to pay what's standard for the real estate market. And now that's pretty obvious. It's somewhere between 5 and 6% total, right? Of the sales price. 5 and 6% total. 2.5% goes to the guy or gal with the listing sign out in front. That's the seller's broker, the listing agent. And then the buyer's broker that comes in and represents the buyer, they also get paid somewhere between 2.5%, 3%, somewhere between 5 and 6. If you get into an upper end market, say multi-millions, you might cut that down to 3%, maybe 4%, depending on the sales price. But so it's kind of this sliding scale. None of this has really changed. It's just the way that we've disclosed it has changed. And I think that's a good thing. Because the more people understand, okay, how are the commissions going, the better it is for everybody involved. It's like, oh, okay. Because you're going to see that when you get the HUD statement, right? You're going to see how much compensation went to each brokerage. And it's like, oh, that's a lot of money. That's the main complaint we always get is, that's a lot of money to stick a sign out in front of a house and sell it. It's a lot of money to write up that contract. Well, it's not just that. You're paying for the experience of that real estate broker's career, collective career. And, sometimes that really, really pays. Negotiating out something difficult. You're in a hot transaction where you've got multiple offers. Having somebody with experience and knowledge, that's what you're paying for, not just sticking the sign in the out in front. All right. So in 2022, the MLS, the Northwest Multiple Listing Service, they provided even more transparency and flexibility. And here's the major things that they brought to the marketplace: decoupling broker compensation, meaning that any compensation the seller chooses to offer the buyer broker is set and paid by the seller, not the listing broker. So the seller, the seller runs that end of things. All right. The seller always has, though, right? Seller always has. You have a talk with your broker. That's kind of how that goes. You work something out. Any compensation here's point number 2. Any compensation the seller chooses to offer the buyer broker is prominently stated on the first page of the purchase and sale agreement. So whatever is on the listing typically, all right, here's the SOC, the selling office commission. 3%, 2.5%, whatever that might be. That now gets moved to the first page of the purchase and sale agreement with an opportunity for the compensation to be accepted by the buyer and the buyer's broker or separately negotiated by the parties. How often does it get negotiated out? Very rarely. It's just, okay, so this one's 2.5%, this one's 3%, whatever it might be. That's what gets stuck on the form. The MLS most recent efforts to promote choice, negotiation opportunities, and transparency are revisions to the Washington State agency law. Now, this is the big part that if you're a real estate broker, you're going to want to kind of remember. So we've got new agency law that will go into effect on January 1st, 2024. All right, January 1st, 2024. Plan to have taken a class in how this whole process is going. You can do it online, go to the MLS. You can do it online. You can sign up for an in-person course, but understand what the new process is. It's not earth-shattering, but it's a little bit of a change. The new law will require brokers to enter into a written service agreement to represent either a buyer or a seller. All agreements must comprehensively address the broker's compensation, the scope of the representation, and all related terms. It's going to be on a standardized form. You're just going to have to understand relatively what those boxes are that you and your clients are going to be talking about. With the revised agency law and Northwest multiple listing system, buyers will agree on how much to pay their own brokers, and buyers can then negotiate for the seller to help cover that cost as part of the purchase. Okay, so you're going to be working, if you're representing a buyer. What does this mean? If you're representing a buyer, you are going to be entering into a contract with that buyer. Now, that has always been an option to get a buyer's agency agreement, meaning as long as I'm working with you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, whatever it might be, then here's how I'm going to get compensated. But now it's required on every transaction. So that is the big difference. So if you're used to representing buyers and you've never done one of these agreements, again, the MLS has got all kinds of, they got online classes, in-person classes. You can look at the form. You can read the form. It's not that tricky to figure out, but that is the new big change coming out. And so if you're a buyer out there, and if you're working with a buyer's agent and they ask you, come December to fill out a form, it's not that they're just being, overly cautious and just trying to be controlling of the transaction. This is something required by law. So if you're a buyer, if you're a seller, know that there's some changes out there. If you're a real estate broker, there are definitely changes that you need to be ready for come January 1st, 2024. And that's why I'm releasing this video and I'm talking about this a fair amount, because this is a major change that's coming up. And it's not necessarily major, but it's a change that is significant to the process in that it is something new. So nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be scared of, but it is something out there that the real estate industry will be dealing with. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's full disclosure. Did this lawsuit make a lot of sense? It didn't to me, but whatever. I'm in Seattle. That's in Missouri. Okay. But it impacted everybody. All right. That's it for this one. Thanks so much for being here. Make sure you hit that subscribe, that notification bell, hit the like button for this video. I'm going to be doing more real estate videos because you guys have been asking for it. So here we are. Thanks again for being here. We'll catch up in the next one. Bye for now.